Thank you. So exciting to be here and have really enjoyed the previous presentations. I'd like to talk to you about megatrends in post-normal times and perhaps discuss a bit on are they any use. But I'd like to first share with you a couple of stories on kind of a self-reflection on my on how I have viewed a couple of terms. First up, megatrends. So when I first heard the term megatrend, I didn't quite like it. I thought that it was so arrogant to talk about that there are these trends and perhaps counter trends, and then there are these megatrends that seem to depict a kind of a inevitable future and easily lead to a very kind of a deterministic view of the future. And at the same time, I was kind of thought that, okay, there are many futures and we need to think about alternatives. So I was kind of wondering on how does this concept of megatrends fit into all of these. Especially when I started reading on literature on post-normal times or buka or tuna times. So I was thinking that, okay, if indeed the complexity, chaos, contradictions, these are the dominant terms, or the world is very uncertain and there's a lot of ambiguity, etc. Where do these megatrends fit in these kind of times? So fast forward to last year, when I was faced with the task of updating Sitra's megatrend material, which is kind of paradoxical. How often do you need to really update megatrends? But anyhow, this was the task. So I started reflecting on what could megatrends actually mean in post-normal times. What would be kind of their use? What kind of value could they provide in these kind of very uncertain, surprising times? And I found kind of a couple of ways into megatrends, and in the process I kind of really got to like the term. So the way I see it is that in these very kind of ambiguous times, there is a growing need for some sort of frame for the kind of the big picture. There's so many things happening, so much stuff emerging. You do need some kind of frame on where you can position things. And of course, you could use some kind of a steep or a variation of these kind of checklists. But then again, they are often a bit too abstract. Perhaps this kind of megatrend material could provide a good big picture. But that also means that it shouldn't be a kind of a list of different trends. It should be more of a kind of a systematic picture or systems view on what kind of changes are happening at the moment, how are they connected, and especially what kind of tensions are there. So I was really inspired by this dialectically oriented futures thinking, which looks at different tensions between these trends and developments and what might come out of those. So in this way, I was able to paint the picture of megatrends not as something inevitable and something really kind of deterministic, but more as a way to really have an understanding of a big picture and understanding also on the issues that are more uncertain, which are more open and where there are these contradictions. So it's one thing to say that there's a lot of conflicts and disagreements and contradictions, and the other thing is to say that, okay, for example, in these areas there are these questions that need to be answered, and there are these tensions because of these developments, and having kind of this understanding of where we've come from and also what are the kind of current current leverage points, if you will. So I came to view that this Megatrends as a map, and this led to another kind of identity crisis. When I first heard the term futures map, I was like, well, that's another term that I really don't like, that it's so static. Painting a picture of futures as something kind of as a map that I kind of like to think about the landscape of futures as constantly changing and shifting, etc. But when I was reflecting on this a couple of weeks ago, I was started to thinking that, okay, perhaps this map metaphor actually is a good way to think about how do we use the Megatrend material or any futures material for that matter. So how do we use maps? Well, first thing is to understand that maps are made for a purpose. So it would be good to ask that who has made the map? What are kind of the underlying motivations of making that map? For whom is that map made for? Is it for companies? Is it for anyone? Is it for kind of describing different boundaries? For what purpose is the map? Is it for orienting? Is it for describing the landscape? Is it for pinpointing a certain kind of road or route to where you want to go? And also, what kind of scale is used? Is it a global map? Is it a local map? Is it what kind of thematic map is it? And these are all questions that need to be asked also when faced with some new kind of foresight material, be it a Megatrend report or something. So who has made it? For whom? For what purpose? What scale? The other thing, and this comes to also to futures literacies, is how do we actually use this material? How do we read the map? And also, do we understand that, okay, the map is one depiction of possibilities. It's not the reality. It's different to look at the map and actually be in a terrain. Then there's the question of do we have the necessary skills to use the map? Do we know how to interpret the different symbols and interpret what does this mean? What are the roads? Can I go off a certain route, etc. Also, when using a map, it's worth keeping in mind that surprises are not mentioned in these maps. Perhaps in some medieval maps there was this notion that here be dragons, that there are some places where you really shouldn't go, that there's this is kind of the unmarked territory. But when you're using a map, you are going to face a lot of different surprises that are not in the map, but are in the terrain. And that's kind of, well, that's normal. And there are also kind of like the metaphor of a map that, okay, well, it does provide some kind of idea of where we are and does help to achieve some kind of a goal. Where do we want to go? But it doesn't describe everything. But I still wasn't quite happy that okay, well, this is still very much in the kind of the old planning paradigm that you make a map and you say that you want to go to this place, and then you make a route and then you just go. But then I realized that, well, it would be easy if I would be the only person with the map and the only person who wants to go somewhere. But then I realized that perhaps we should think about being in the fog, in the terrain, in the woods, not by ourselves but together. And perhaps some other person has a different map. perhaps some people don't have a map at all and are just kind of wandering around. And now the challenge is that we can't move in this terrain by ourselves. We have to move together. And this kind of this really opened some ideas for me that, okay, well, if we see this first, this megatrends as a map, and then we see that we are connected to other people wandering in the fog, and we should go someplace. Well, at least the maps give some kind of a frame or a strategic object or some kind of a common denominator on which to start the discussion on where do we want to go. It's not that we should then debate on who has the best map or how do we that okay, this map says that we need to go there or something like that, but it does provide some kind of a frame for the discussion that we should be having at the moment. Not to keep this too kind of on the abstract level, I thought that I'd share an example on what came to be known as Megatrends 2020, perhaps unimaginatively. So the Megatrend material that me and my colleagues did. You can find more on our webpage. But what we really wanted to do here was to create kind of this idea of, okay, here are the key themes, key changes, transformations, if you will, and here are the tensions between these. I'm not going to go through all of these, but just to highlight some of them, and what would they mean in this in these current times. Are the megatrends still the same? Well, surprisingly, they are still the same. The current large issues are still, or the challenges are still the same. For example, ecological reconstruction, so responding to climate change, to biodiversity loss, to overconsumption of resources. We are still faced with these issues, and they are still urgent. And now, if we think about, there's a lot of discussion in Finland, for example, on what kind of economic measures should be done right now to save companies or people's livelihoods. We do need to do a lot of things now, but keeping in mind the kind of the longer term. And here we need to have some idea of what are the longer term challenges. Well, we need to, at the same time, respond to the current crisis and very kind of urgently start with ecological reconstruction, reforming our society, reforming the way we produce electricity or food or how we move, etc. Also, this kind of megatrends as a map, it can highlight things that should be or it could act as a way to interpret the different things that are happening also in the crisis. We are in this report, we are stating that, for example, confusion is power, and this we see with also the rise of fake news concerning the current pandemic, and it kind of acts as a way to understand where does this fit into all of the other changes. Or if we see that I mentioned economy or economic measures, well, there is a kind of a more the underlying transformation taking place, perhaps, that we see that the economy is seeking direction, and we can now think that, okay, will this catalyze the change or not? But at least that we have some kind of way to interpret the emerging issues we see also in this current crisis. In addition to this megatrends, we also added this idea of metatrends, or use this concept of metatrends to depict these changes that change the changes. so these metatrends affect the megatrends and shift their kind of their direction in a subtle ways. And here here we have, for example, the post-normal times. The megatrends are also a way to understand better the big picture. So I see post-normal times as a very good way to approach the current situation. And indeed, as John Sweeney said in a previous presentation, that there is no going back to the normal. So the understanding and where these kind of discussions come from, and how should we perhaps think about them, and to think about that, okay, the surprises are not going anywhere soon, and as Real said, do we really want to even live in a world without surprises? So it's also good to be, in addition to the megatrends, to look at these more underlying, kind of more abstract thought level processes. I could also add that, of course, you shouldn't in these times forget about the weak signals and wildcards and the whole menagerie of post-normal times. So the surprises, we still need to kind of add them to all of this megatrend material as well. Then about using the map. We have paid increasing amount of effort on really making it easier for basically anyone to understand the trends and use them and to interpret what they mean in their context. So megatrend always has kind of different interpretations when you go into the, let's say, local level, or if you go into the a certain thematic area. So the big picture is one thing, and then the kind of the local interpretation of it is another. And in order to aid this interpretation, we have, for example, these Megatrend cards, which surprisingly contain cards with trends on them. Very simple, very widely used. And of course, in these times, perhaps the physical cards are not that useful. So I quickly made a kind of an online version, which you can find. It's also open source, so feel free to make a better one. I'm not a coder, but this is kind of a one version that you can use. We have also made this kind of poster. This one is now in Finnish, but it's being translated as well. So where you have this megatrends picture on the one side, but on the other side you have this canvas on where to and instructions how to use the canvas in order to interpret what these trends mean in your situation. So this is again ways to help people to really use the map, megatrends as a map. You use it and interpret it and bring it to the level that they find interesting. So perhaps finally, I think the key question here is that we can use these megatrends as a map if we really pay attention to how it is used, and also understand that we are not kind of moving anywhere alone, that we have to move together. And then the key question is that, okay, what kind of future do we want to build together, and what does we mean, etc. But really this idea of talking about preferable futures, talking about values, what we find important, etc. I think this is well, it's always important, but it's especially important now. So with that, I thank you and welcome all your questions. And let's see, there's the Q&A. So there's a question on from the megatrends presenting, which one do you think is the most eminent, and which one has the ability to shift change in a not so long future? Well, this is the way we kind of understand this is that all of these are of course connected, but we have positioned the kind of the urgent need for ecological reconstruction at the very center, because we think that that is perhaps the most eminent and also most connected to all the others. But it's not, we shouldn't view it as a kind of a separate one, but as something that is connected to other things. Okay, then there's a question on VUCA in Chulu means wake up, which seems to be what happened to the world at large, specifically in terms of the climate crisis. Thuna in Zulu means a grave tomb, or to be inappropriate, unbecoming. This reminds me of earlier speakers who mentioned metaphor and narrative as a tool for making sense of things and for shaping decision making. I'd be interested to know more about the relationship between narrative and postnormal times theory, if there is a connection. Well, I'm perhaps not the best person to answer this. There are a lot of better people also in this conference to talk about post-normal times, but I see a very strong connection between the narrative and post-normal times, that the stories we tell about futures really do matter, and the metaphors we use really do matter, and they are also kind of a key to broadening the range of futures that we think is possible, and to kind of challenge the manufacturer's normalcy field that Sweeney and Sarda is talking about. Okay, what else? How have you chosen the dots trends for your map? Well, this has been a very iterative process, and because these kind of overall pictures do matter. So we do have a whole report on this topic, and we do have a lot of different trends. And then it is, of course, a really key question on what do we kind of raise to the front page, so to speak, and how do we, what kind of words do we use? I don't have a kind of a definitive answer for how we chose them, but it's been a very collaborative process with my colleagues who have backgrounds in very different fields. So trying to really understand the whole picture and what is the key question between these different thematic areas. Also, in what we did this year or this time together, we don't update it yearly, luckily, but with the Megatrend cards, we also added tension cards there. So also in the picture I showed, the dots represent these tensions, and we do have quite a lot more of them in the cards, but we saw that perhaps these are the things that are most crucial now in order to also bring the futures discussion forward. Okay, how can we make the metatrends more visible and concrete to the stakeholders that are not that have not seen the urgency of the megatrends itself? For example, to ecological reconstruction. Yeah, well, when I go around presenting our megatrend material, and we do get quite a lot of these requests for megatrend presentations. It depends on the audience if I include the metatrends there also. So sometimes it might be that actually these metatrends are something that really open up the bigger picture for the different audiences. And other times it's just that, okay, we'll create just another term that I don't understand. I didn't understand megatrends. I don't understand futures thinking and these metatrends. I'm just gonna close my eyes and wish I was somewhere else. So it depends on the audience and being really kind of sensitive on how different things are how people feel about these different terms, how familiar they are them. The ecological reconstruction is something we usually do include because it's such a crucial thing and very central in our megatrend work. What are the different aspects of population as a megatrend? Because I only saw aging mentioned, but other demographic changes are also eminent at the moment, especially in Europe. Indeed, and I forgot to mention that this Megatrend 2020, it's made from a Finnish perspective. So therefore, there is, for example, aging. Aging population is not a global megatrend. Of course, these different demographic changes, they are different in different parts. But this is made from a Finnish perspective, and it does also include other things. So we are talking about this increase in diversity, and which also comes from the other changes. For example, changing work means that there are different, the kind of the old categorizations of work don't really apply, or then there are changes in political behavior. So perhaps the left-right categorization doesn't work. So we do have that included there as well. Okay, thanks. Can you go a bit deeper into your megatrend map and how you arrived at these 5 areas? Yeah, sure. There's some of you might have noticed that there is a kind of a steep frame there. So there is something on environment, there's something on political and social and technological and economic. There's also cultural things or trends, and they are more kind of cross-cutting. And yeah, this was rather iterative process. We looked at a lot of different other megatrend reports. What they say that the things are fairly similar, which is kind of obvious because megatrends by definition should be kind of global, long-term, or very kind of large scale developments. So you kind of have a handful of options from which to choose from, and for a long time I toyed with just three kind of main things, but then it evolved into this 5 because of the connections between them. So this current frame is based on really depicting the different connections between these different thematic areas, and perhaps therefore giving a better understanding of what the big picture is, at least in from a Finnish perspective. I often wonder if and how all megatrends should be taken into consideration and prioritized in the world. Pandemics have been identified as a possibility for a long time, but it wasn't in the radar for most people, nations. Do you think there is a limit to how much we can prepare ourselves? The map will never tell everything. Well, the map will never tell everything we might find in our way. Yeah, this is it's a good question and something that was also touched, for example, in the presentation by John Sweeney on how should we think about how is this all of this foresight used, and what is its role? Indeed, this pandemic has been thrown around as a wild card for a long time, but then there's a question of how well has it been kind of how well have we really considered or perhaps embodied all of the consequences that it might bring, and perhaps there is room for improvement in really making this material something that more kind of experiential and something that leaves a more kind of a deep feeling as well as providing kind of the analytical frame. I also like the filter theory by Ansov that outlines basically that you have this filter on what kind of what are the things you see in your surroundings, what are the things, how do you interpret these things, these signals that you capture. But then there's also this power filter. How do you actually use the knowledge? And I think we could focus a bit more also on the power filter, and this is something I've been thinking about. But it's not just that we should focus then on, let's say, decision makers, but really to increase, well, futures literacy in all of us. Perhaps that's also a way to be better kind of prepared and more comfortable with all the surprises. Do you see any connection between ecological reconstruction and human mental reconstruction, i.e. a re-engineering and restructuring of our minds and mindsets? Well, I see that there's a lot of, there's some discussion on this idea of new civics or discussion on values and discussion on way of life in connection to ecological reconstruction. We do have a project on that as well, going that what should be kind of the new civics or Bildung or this idea of what do we see as important and desirable, etc. So I see this as a the connection in this discussion on values. There's also, of course, different stuff happening then on, let's say, more engineering approaches to cognition, and I'm not really a fan of those, but it's also interesting development to look at. Is this a collective future, or will all of us be experiencing different futures? Well, that's a good question. I used to think that, well, we do have a lot of different futures, but at least the present is a bit collective experience. I'm not sure that we share the same understanding what is the present moment. So we might experience that differently as well, and for sure we have different ideas on what is the preferred future or probable or possible futures, so I think that this plurality is something that needs to be also embraced, and perhaps this idea also of not really having one preferred future, one goal, but really trying to map out the kind of the borders of what is preferable. What can make you map look differently in normal time than it looks in post-normal times? Well, if I understand this question correctly, I think that let's say in normal times, if there sometimes were such a time, we have looked at these megatrends and other futures material as really kind of ways to know about futures, and that now I'm kind of seeing these as more as a ways to have some sort of frame on how do we understand things that are emerging, how do we make sense of the big picture, how do we make sense also of our different understandings of what the future might bring. Curious if there are examples of microtrends or metatrends becoming megatrends, or are we still early in understanding these? Well, I think there's a lot of research done on trends and also on the relationship between, let's say, weak signals and how some of them might then signal an oncoming trend, and how these different trends might then kind of come together to form a more kind of mega trend. Also, this idea of meta trend, I'm a very kind of I'm an engineer by background, so I have a very pragmatic view of these concepts. So this meta trend, I would say that some of these meta trends that we have listed, others might consider mega trends, and this is of course an interesting semantic discussion, but I feel that if this concept of meta trend can bring more understanding into the bigger picture or the overall picture of megatrend, then I'm kind of happy. What are the big takeaways we might consider from the population is aging and becoming increasingly diverse megatrend? Well, this is again from a Finnish perspective, that what we are seeing is that old categorizations are not as useful as they were, and therefore we might kind of define ourselves in new ways, be it political orientation or be it where we see ourselves in the workplace, or be it cultural kind of groups. But we also increasingly kind of define others as belonging to some kind of newly defined group. And there's a kind of a tension between this that if we see these new groupings as exclusive, then we see that there will be a lot more kind of disagreement between different groups of people. But if we see these as kind of overlapping and still kind of can maintain our sense of solidarity and sense of being connected to other humans, then I see then these kind of new groupings can be good and be and help also make sense of the world. So that would be one takeaway from this. The others that we mentioned have to do with, for example, aging population and the welfare society. There's some tensions there. There's connections to new health issues. There's so there's, well, once you start opening these, there are a lot of different connections there. Would going beyond the megatrends, i.e. become creative about them, could that challenge our perception of the futures we think of that are possible or preferable, and maybe even our past? Yeah, I think that the megatrends also, well, I see that they really provide this kind of basis, and you can start then from that to challenge also the megatrends. So to think about counter trends. There's a lot of discussion in Finland, for example, the global megatrend of urbanization, and we see that also in Finland, that people are increasingly moving to cities. But is it inevitable? Can we see counter trends? Can we see signals of this turning? Do we see any kind of examples of where it goes the other way? For example, I think there's some from France, for example. So I think once we have kind of set that okay, these are the things that everybody is now talking about, that this is the future, then we can start better to know what to challenge, so to speak. So I think there's definitely room to become more creative about this. What is the craziest predictions you have heard so far on the post-COVID period, and why do you think it's crazy? Well, I haven't really heard that many crazy predictions. I've heard some alarming ones, which also go to show that perhaps the future is more open now in the minds of people than before. For example, there was a news story on that the kind of the far right people see this also as an opportunity to seize power and cause chaos and rise to power, so there is, which then I take that there is a need to really say that what is the preferred future, what do we want, and to kind of to counter perhaps the futures that we don't want, for example. What is the best way to translate these megatrends to local terms and concerns, especially when bringing these Eurocentric visions to Latin America? Well, I would first see that if there are some good megatrend reports focusing on Latin America, then it all comes down to really interpretation and interpreting these with the local people. And even though we have this kind of the megatrends from a Finnish perspective, we do encourage people in Finland to interpret them, for example, from their local point of view. So there's also some variability between, for example, Helsinki or Lapland. They have slightly different concerns. So it's and it's something that needs to be done then on the local level. So thinking that okay, does this sound kind of familiar, this trend? Do we have statistics to look what does it mean in this local context? And yeah, really challenging and interpreting that. What's the link for your cards? Well, if you go to citra.fi/megatrends, you can find the cards there. There in the material, the physical cards, and for the online version, you go to bit.ly/Megatrend Cards. Do you see any present microtrends getting converted into megatrends post COVID-19? I'm a bit wary of these analyses, because I think we are still very much in the crisis, and things are perhaps shifting. So there's a lot of reporters asking that will humans change and all these questions, and my reply is that it really depends on us. So this might be something that catalyzes a lot of the changes that are now happening. This might be a place where we really speed up ecological reconstruction, for example, or it might not. So I really don't know yet, and I'm suspicious of anyone who says that they know the answer now. How might a country close the gap of any existing issues in order to catch up with the megatrends? Well, I think I'm not sure if I understand the question. I would say that if there are some existing issues, that then look at those and how they are kind of changing. And yeah, so again, it comes down to the interpretation. So there you can, bit.li/Megatrend Cards. Thank you, and thank you all for these great questions. I had a lot of fun, and stay safe.